Well, I think we've mentioned this in a previous video, or at least I have. I think it's a pathway, right? So this might be a new snippet. You might want to shorten this video because I want to talk about almost how to become a GOAT. And obviously, to become a GOAT, you've got to have weird statistical accolades. You've got to have a lot of mainstream appeal. And that's just to start almost trying out for the process. And then it enters two paths, right? And your two paths are only began by making the finals. The second you make the finals, you can now have the two paths in front of you. And the two paths are perfection or quantity. And no one has really done both. Jordan came the closest to doing both because he got 6 on a perfect record. But there are players that got 7, and then it allows you to debate those. For LeBron, he has made the finals more than Jordan does. That's a fact. But he didn't go perfect. And even if he had won 6, people would still hold that against him and say, well, he was 6-4, right? So of course he's going to win 6 when he gets there 10 times. If LeBron had been 6-0 and then lost 4 straight, who knows how it's going to go. But for Luka, when he makes the finals, or if he makes the finals, because it's never a guarantee in the NBA, a lot of things can happen, he has to win to stay on the Michael Jordan track. And if he loses, then he will enter the LeBron track. And those are the two paths that you can take. Tim Duncan on the LeBron track, Kobe Bryant on the LeBron track. This is the thing. Most players can't even enter the realm of Michael Jordan because you eventually lose one. It's too difficult to stay perfect, right? And the weird thing is, we don't penalize anyone for capping out. If Luka loses in the conference finals, who cares? Same
Correct.
for Tatum, right?
Correct.
Tatum's only 0-1 in the NBA finals, so he's not that bad, right? But if you make the finals, you open yourself up to that conversation for the LeBron track or the Jordan track. And I don't know if we'll ever see a player get the Jordan track again, right?
Look, 6-0. That's why I've clearly ranked him as the GOAT. But we've been there and talked about that before. Look, I think the whole conversation about Ant Edwards as MJ. Surely you got to start with how about Ant Edwards as Kobe. Yeah, and then maybe people are going to make that argument. Well, he doesn't have a Shaq. Is that where you would sort of deviate? But he does have a number one draft pick sidekick in Cat. Yeah, who was an all-star, multiple year all-star 2010 guy. Then they dragged across a 4-time now defensive player of the year. Yeah. All right. So let's say Gobert's like oh hell, I don't know, like Rodman or some sort of sense when he went to the Lakers, and he has that sort of like and he obviously did that with the Bulls too. Yeah, he's been in both both of those runs in that sort of sense. And it's like, look, I think it's probably premature to go all the way to Jordan right now. Look, these 4 talented all-star superstars in the NBA are all grabbing or gunning for their number one. Yeah. And one of them's going to get no number one. Yeah, that's the catch, right? One of them is going to get the number one. Yeah, that first ring. And one of them's going to get that first loss. Or for Tatum, at least his second now. Yeah, that's another story, right? Tatum gets there again this time, and it's not against the dynasty Golden State Warriors. It's against another first-time team, and let's say and they drop this one too. Yeah, which could be a bummer if they run to the T-Wolves, or they're a bummer if we run to the Luka, and Luka is going to be great. Okay, that now he's 0-2 in the finals. Yeah, now
But
that's another story.
that's the concern, is that Tatum is going to make the finals and have to play a really good Luka or a really good Timberwolves squad. And I know that I said Boston has a clear path to the finals, but that path just gets them to the finals. Then it becomes a lot more interesting. And I think for them, I think they had a better shot against Denver than they do against Minnesota when you look at that front court, because Kristaps needs to be there to stretch the floor. But here's the issue. Okay, Cat will take you. And then Gobert's still got your paint locked down. And then Boston turns into a 3-point shooting team. And they will lose games because they cannot hit all those threes. So,
Does anyone think Al Horford is like Jokic? Like, I don't know, man. Like,
did you see that stat line? The first player over the age of 38 to have that many points, steals, threes, rebounds in that many minutes in a game closing series. I don't know. The role players for Minnesota clearly proved today that they can win you games, because you're talking about a game 7 and it was a tale of two teams. You got one team that had their 2 stars score 85% of their shots, and then you've got a Minnesota team who pulled off a very Spurs-like performance where everybody contributed and they beat you, and they beat you defensively as well. And I really like that point you made about the Spurs dynasty, because the Spurs dynasty was almost 15 years, right? And they just kept plugging and playing new players. And for Minnesota and for Dallas, Dallas is banking on Luka and Kyrie, and Kyrie might not be a staple for an entire time. When you look at Minnesota, they've clearly invested in Gobert. He's still on the books for another 200 million, and he's a defensive player of the thing, and that's his role. You've got Ant, your young superstar, and you've got Cat, McDaniels, Conley, Reed. You've got all these really interesting pieces that will probably be around for a couple of seasons minimum. And they beat Denver. So can Denver get back there next season? I know I'm projecting way too far forward, but can they get back there next season when Minnesota's loitering? And I guess that's the interesting thing about the NBA now.
So to go, I feel like I want to U-turn you back here quickly though. You mentioned you want to talk about the GOAT conversation though. So at the end of the day, surely you're going to agree with me that perfection wins over quantity.
It's just I feel like you're always trying to get me to say it on camera. The way I'd summarize this is perfection is a statistic, and statistics can be played with. Quantifiable data is there. So LeBron is 4-6 in the finals.
Nothing to do with LeBron. LeBron's not even there. Don't even name drop LeBron right now. This is not a LeBron.
No,
I'm just asking. Look at the bigger picture here. Quantity or perfection. This is quality, really. Yeah, quantity over quality for championship. Would you rather go 5-0, or would you rather go 5-5?
To me, you would go quantity, because quantity means you were there with a shot more than not.
Okay, so I use an example where they both had 5. Yeah, how about 5-0 and 4-6? Are you still saying 4-6 is greater than 5-0?
When you look at the context, because we have to talk about LeBron, because that is the stat line of 4-6. No, it is.
I didn't even mean it that way. Let's be honest. No, I did not mean it that way. I can give you different numbers if you want. How about 3-0 versus 2-4? I don't know. That doesn't matter.
I guess the way to view it would be, when you make the finals, you have demonstrated that your team is better than 14 other teams at minimum because of the brackets.
Right. So you're second place a lot. Good job. What's the point? No one cares about second place.
People create their own narratives with the NBA. We have a lot of great players who never won a ring. We still talk about them in certain tiers. The reason why I would say quantity is important, the perfection that Jordan has is great, but it's very contextual, right? And the thing is...
What are you going to say now? That it was playing against people that didn't know how to play?
No. I don't want to talk about... the league is different then and now. I think one of the big things for the Jordan stuff that doesn't get talked about enough is the league expanded a couple of times when he was in the league. Okay. And because of that, expansion drafts occur. Teams get weakened because they're not as top-heavy, right? So
why didn't the Bulls get weakened? Why didn't the Bulls get weakened? If every team gets weakened, then why did the Bulls not get weakened? Were they immune from the fact that there was expansion?
I wouldn't say it's that they're immune because of that. I would say the talent level is different. When you look at all NBA teams from the 90s and you see how those players would stack up in different eras, even just the 2000s, I think the league is becoming more talented as each passing year goes on. Sure, I think that's an element of it.
Sure.
Obviously that means you have to adapt, right? So you have to adapt to what the league's currently doing. So, it's a 3-point shooting league now. Obviously, if you take those teams back to that era, it's a different thing. The point I'm trying to make with all of this, he got there 6 times and that was it. So why didn't he get there more, right? And it's those contexts where you justify and you say, oh, well, he came back from baseball and it was late, so he didn't win that. Or he had to get past the Pistons, or he had to do that. For him, his narrative or his story is so idolized, right? For LeBron, the hard part for LeBron is he went to the finals against that Golden State Warriors dynasty. And let's just do those two. Because I think they're the fair two that we could talk about. Because he did blow it against the Mavs, was too young against the Spurs, and all of that stuff. But let's say he goes to the Golden State Warriors and he comes up against KD, Steph, Clay, one of the best teams of all time. He lost those series. That was his brick wall. He couldn't get past that brick wall, right? If he had that brick wall in the Eastern Conference Finals, we don't hold it against him, right? Because those numbers don't go on his record, and he's got 2 less finals appearance, and it's not as bad now. He's 4-4 in the finals. It's a little bit easier to swallow. But he went up against that team twice, and he couldn't beat them.
Let me ask you, give you a scenario. No Jordan. No Jordan, okay?
LeBron? Right.
Oh, unfortunately, the example does tee in with LeBron, but I'm not talking about LeBron. It's not specific about LeBron, okay? Tim Duncan. has 5 rings with the
And 2 losses.
Spurs. Yeah, obviously, but he did not win back to back. Maybe that's the asterisk. Yeah, that's always been the Spurs asterisk. They didn't win back to back. Yeah, Kobe won back to back. Jordan won back to back. Oh no, I dropped Jordan's name here. Elijah won back to back. Yeah, so he's one of the greatest centers of all time in that sort of list, in that sort of sense. Obviously LeBron did win back to back. Absolutely. Okay, so Tim Duncan has 5 rings. He's 5-1 in the finals, and one of the losses is to LeBron. Okay, and if he had won that one there, again,
He's
that
6
was the Ray Allen in his 6-0. Would we be saying Tim Duncan is in the top 5 greatest of all time, potentially maybe even number 2?
The hard part with Duncan compared to the other stars that we're going to talk about, Duncan stat wise probably is one of the worst top 10 players, right?
Because he doesn't score a lot.
Exactly, but that's the issue. That's the issue. When we look at LeBron and we look at Jordan, they have super impressive stats that almost automatically make them the top dog, the number 1 option, the alpha, right? And because of that, we're holding them to a certain tier. They needed to win NBA championships. For some reason, Duncan fits under this weird like superstar role player.
So you're saying if Tim Duncan was not 6-0, if Tim Duncan was 6-0 in finals, would he be one of the top 5 greatest players of all time?
Well, who would he see? Where is he? Like, we haven't done a top 10 list ever. But
you'd have to say somewhere in the top 10 or top 15, yeah, at the very least, okay?
Well, he's in the top 15 easy without even thinking about that list. But in terms of the top,
look at his record, because again, we're talking about perfection. Yeah, remember, it comes back to perfection versus quantity. Tim Duncan is perfect, 6-0 matched MJ, but maybe he didn't have 2 3-peats. Maybe he wasn't a 30-point league top scorer, and that craziness that MJ was, the icon that MJ was. So that's why I'm putting him at number 2. Yeah, you could make some arguments of sliding down the list a little bit more, but I'm saying there, and this is not, like I said, this is not an MJ comparison. Let's talk about Tim Duncan. If Tim Duncan was 6-0, I'm saying that I think he should be in the top 5, arguably up to number 2.
Well, so you think about it then. He drops 1 finals.
Because then he also beats LeBron. Yeah, because he beats LeBron, who's an all-time player. Yeah, we're putting LeBron right now either 1 or 2. Yeah, he's either 1 or 2 on whoever's list. Okay, let's be clear. All right. So Tim Duncan does not lose to LeBron. In fact, beats him twice. Yeah, he clearly has to be above LeBron, and therefore LeBron must be, let's say, 3. So MJ, Tim Duncan, LeBron.
So this has got me looking, because I'm just trying to find some specific data for you. Super interesting. I found a wiki link. I might send it through to you. It gives you percentages for players, right? Based off their championship wins.
What the hell? But what are you going to give me now? Warp and win shares? We're going back to
no,
when we first
started.
What are you trying to tell me?
The win percentage is based off the seasons played. So the way that this table is looking at it, I'll send it through. The way that this table is looking at it, it's looking at it of how many NBA seasons did you play and did you win the championship? Obviously, Bill Russell sits at the top. He played 13 seasons. He won the championship 11 times. But I think we all collectively agree. I've sent it a messenger. We all collectively agree it's just not the way you look at his career, because he played against 7 other teams. It's just a different era, right? Michael Jordan sits there. He played 15 seasons and he won the championship 40% of the time. There's a couple of outliers here. There's a couple of like 70% people, but again, they always seem to fall in the 80s era, right? Tim Duncan sits there, 19 seasons, 26%. I guess the way you look at it, if Jordan played 5 more seasons, and Jordan hurts his stats too by playing the Washington years, he'd actually have almost a 50% win rate if he just played the 12 that he originally signed up for. But let's say Jordan...
So one second. I just brought it up. Okay, I've opened it up. This is a percentage of how many seasons you played and how much you won. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right, go on. Correct. Continue.
So, obviously LeBron played 20 seasons so far, has a 20% NBA Finals win rate. And then the power of statistics, Klay Thompson's played half of his seasons and he's won the championship in 40%, right? So obviously the statistics there can be a little bit misleading. And I think that's where I want to bring it back to the whole conversation about Jordan. Jordan won when he got there, but he didn't get there as much as other people got there. And we don't hold him not getting there against him. That's the weirdest thing to me. Like, we create this narrative that he couldn't get past the bad boys, right? And when he did get past the bad boys, then he started winning NBA championships. Well, LeBron lost 2 teams in the Eastern Conference Finals, but what I need you to understand, Jordan couldn't beat Detroit for a while until Pippen came along. Unfortunately, LeBron couldn't beat the Golden State Warriors with KD, right? The only difference between those two immovable objects, right, that beat them multiple years in a row was the fact that one occurred in the NBA Finals, so it goes on his finals record, and the other didn't, right? Jordan lost in the first round and the second round to teams, and he couldn't get past them. Even the Celtics, right, got swept by the Celtics, but he scored 63 in a game, so it's okay. I think sometimes we fixate so much on the perfection of the NBA Finals that we forget you weren't perfect. No one wins every game. You can't always win the finals at minimum, but you can't always win in general. I think the LeBron thing, the impressive thing is, for half of his career, he was in the NBA Finals. And for almost a decade, he was pretty much in the NBA Finals, which means that he always beat.
I think you're murking the water here with a whole bunch of statistical key points. And again, this is the reality, right? This is where, and now we've gone into an MJ LeBron conversation, which was not even the conversation, because I want to bring it back to what the actual conversation was. But you've gone now into LeBron and MJ, okay? The point here is that people choose the metrics that they want to illustrate to define who they rate as the GOAT, yeah, as number one. Okay, so statistically, sure, whatever. Look, there's a long list of statistics here that you're giving me on Wikipedia. All right, I think it is irrelevant of the percentage of times you get there. This is why, going back to what we just spoke about, Luka, if he doesn't get there, it's okay. Sure, it's another season that the Mavs did not get the finals nor win a ring. It's okay. That is not a blight on his quest, and he's still young enough in that sense to be the GOAT. But if he gets there and loses, they're not ready. And maybe this is where LeBron was, maybe you could say, cursed or unfortunate that he got there really, really early against the Spurs and in an underdog team. And credit to them, they got there, don't get me wrong, but then he started off 0-1. His quest was already on the wrong foot. He was 0-1 at that point. Okay? That's the part that's relevant. And that's my belief. Again, this is in, everyone has their own opinion. You want to say it's a percentage of times you get there based upon the amount of seasons you get there. Well, sure, okay, and it's a choice of making it there. But I'm saying that is not relevant because 28 teams don't get there. Okay, and that none of that affects their legacy, whether they're great or wherever they're moving up that list of all-time greatness. It's when you get there, now you can cement it, or now you can hurt it. Yeah, that's the point. And of course, we're not talking about all-time. You can't obviously be an all-time great if you never get there. So you have to get there sometimes. You have to get there at least. Let's say the bar set at 6, yeah? So you probably have to get there at least 6 times. And if you're ever going to be in the conversation, you probably need to get at least 7 to win 7. Yeah, okay? But let's say LeBron went 6-1 versus MJ went 6-0. Sure, now you could say, well, he's got at least as many, but he got there one more time, but unfortunately he dropped that one. Okay, maybe. Okay, but the point here is that that's not the statistic we're talking about here. But it comes back to that whole initial point I'm talking about and why I brought up Tim Duncan as an example. Okay, it's the conversion rate at the top. Yeah, if we looked at other sports and athletes, yeah, I don't know, I'm trying to pick something. All right, like let's say you picked another sport. How many times, do you get there? And if you don't get there, no one even thinks about it. But when you get there and you win, that's when you become relevant. Okay, and that's why that is important. It's that conversion rate at the top because you are there now, and that's where it counts, and that's where perfection over quantity, as far as I am concerned, is higher than that. Yeah, if you want that second footnote, how you adjust it, if you have a tiebreaker, like I said, tiebreaker. If you're both 6-0, what's a tiebreaker? Well, then the player that's got 6-1 versus the guy that's 6-0, I guess you give it to him. He's got the quantity, and that's how.
Well, see, that's the interesting thing because obviously, Jordan is actually like when you look at this list, outside of the 60s, there's not like Robert Horry has one more ring than him, but Robert Horry is the true outlier. Even down to like it takes until you get to the 5th, ring. So Robert Horry having 7 rings is pretty crazy.
So 40%, MJ 40% is actually not a bad number, right?
MJ's at 40% is pretty good. And if you factor in the 3 years at Washington, you take them off, right? He was basically batting 50%, right? So 50% of the time he played with the Bulls, he made the finals and he won it, right? And for LeBron, unfortunately, he's played 20 seasons and he made it 10 times, and then he's only won it 4 times when he's actually made it. There's a lot of things that go against it. I think context is super important, right? I think context is important. You mentioned the 07 Spurs. That's not a fair matchup, right? It's not a fair matchup at all. That team is one of the worst statistically ever, but it goes on his record. We all just collectively accept that.
Mhm.
The blunder against the Mavs, right? That was their finals to lose, and they lost it, right? They lose 1 against the Spurs, but you could make a stronger case and say they almost lost 2 against the Spurs. Then should he have beaten the Warriors right before they took off, right? Right before in 2015, not in their 3-1 comeback. That's another one as well. LeBron could easily have had 6, right? And I'm sure he probably thinks about this from time to time, or he reflects on it and says the Dallas series and the 2015 Warriors series are probably the 2 that he needed to win, right? For him to get the 6, but also let the other 4, I guess, be contextual, because he was never going to beat the Spurs in 07. I don't think anyone was going to beat those Warriors team, right? It took all of them falling apart for Toronto to beat them in 6 games. I think that's where LeBron falls off, right? And so the perfection angle is important, but I think if we were talking about LeBron at 6 and 4, I think we'll be looking at the context of his wins, the teams he played against, the stats that he's got, and we'd be almost saying that he is on par with Jordan, right? So I think that's where quantity becomes important, because 2 more finals wins for LeBron with his current record, I think that the perfection becomes irrelevant, because it's about the fact that he matched him and he kept going.
I will have a different narrative here if LeBron had 6, but he doesn't have 6.
No, he doesn't, and he's not going to get 6.
Everyone continues to want to jump on the LeBron side. You can cite every other statistic that helps you in that cause. Oh, he's got the all-time leading scoring record. He's got played 20 seasons, 21 now, whatever. He's going to play probably a couple more still. He's going to, I don't know, he's going to win all these statistical categories and so on and so forth, and whatever, however many other side awards that he got because of his longevity. All right, none of that is I'm not arguing against that. It's all facts. Yeah, but the point here is he doesn't have 6, and therefore he can't match that number. And then from there he doesn't. Then there's no conversation of a tiebreaker. You can't go, oh well, LeBron got 2, but he went 2 and 15, so he got there 17 times, so now he's the greatest.
Well,
that's the point.
Look, I think, also the hardest thing for LeBron is that he did it in the Eastern Conference, and I think we've consistently said, throughout the years, that the Eastern Conference is not as good as the Western Conference. Admittedly, is his story different if he's in the Western Conference because he only makes the finals 4 times and he wins all 4? There's a lot of hypotheticals of the GOAT perfection. I think to bring it back to Luka and what I said before, Luka's on 2 pathways if he makes the finals.
Yep.
He goes perfect,
Yep.
or he goes for the quantity route, right? And the quantity route isn't just about making the finals, so maybe I haven't been clear.
Don't go for the quantity route.
It's about winning finals.
Yes.
So if it takes you 8 attempts to get to 6, then we give you credit for the 6 that you matched Jordan on, but then it's super impressive that you actually got there 2 more times. Sure. And you were in contention, because that's the difference. Everyone's a contender in the first round, right? And then slowly they drop off. And I think, I personally feel like it's way too simplistic to say that we just don't worry about you until you make the finals. It's incredibly difficult to make the finals, especially when you're the focal point of your team. And Jordan did it 6 times. LeBron did it 10 times. Kobe did it 7 times. Duncan did it 6 times. Like, these guys made the finals a lot. I think Kareem made it 8 times. Like, players have to make the finals just to be in this conversation. And for one of these players, they get to flirt with the GOAT conversation. Obviously, they need to do it more than once for them to actually be seriously considered, though.